everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from irishsportsdaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, November 14th. Notre Dame has their final home slate against Virginia coming up, final regular season home slate. Fingers crossed for a home game in the playoffs, but it is the final guaranteed home game for Notre Dame in 2024. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to preview that game. We're going to talk about the latest college football playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday. Isaac K is tired of Penn State fans. I'll tell you what. Oh, wait. Whoa. I clicked on the wrong one. Not the greatest start to this. All right. Hey, I'm so tired of Penn State fans. Do they not realize that Boise State actually has better wins and a better loss than them? It's a fair point from Isaac K. All facts there. We're going to
I don't know if they have better wins, but they have a better loss, probably.
They don't have better wins. UNLV might be a better win. Who else?
I don't know. No one really.
Who else did they beat? Who else did they beat?
They lost very close games. They don't have any other.
They don't have a ranked win?
No.
Oh. Well, they definitely have a better loss.
Did they beat Wazoo? They beat Wazoo, but
they beat Wazoo. They're ranked. They have a ranked win, and Penn State does not. Does Penn State have a ranked win? Yes or no? Is the question.
No, they don't.
They're not even close. All right. So they have a better win and they have a better loss than Ohio State does, or than Penn State does. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about all the things that come up in the chat and what people want to discuss. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in so far. If you like what you hear today and you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going to go live. As always, links to the podcast, if you prefer that format, are in the description below. And as we've talked about, you got to gear up for ESQ's Black Friday sale. And when we say Black Friday, we mean Black Week. After the Army game, Ge Wang of ESQ Clothing, the founder of ESQ Clothing, of course, Notre Dame alum, Ge Wang, he is going to match the percentage of points that Notre Dame scores against Army. So if Notre Dame scores 35 points, they'll get 35% off, 40 points, 40% off, and on and on and on. So you're going to want to head over to ESQ Clothing. It's going to go live the Sunday after the game, and it's going to be for the whole next week of Black Friday. So if you're looking for a sport coat shirt, bomber jacket, tuxedo, whatever you're looking for, head over to ESQ Clothing. The players, you've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches, right? Excuse me. So he's going to do you right. Head over to ESQ Clothing. Valid on online items, but is not used. You cannot use in conjunction with a gift card and things of that nature. So head over to ESQ Clothing. He's going to take care of you. Black Friday sale. All right, Jamie. Let's throw up the rankings right now. Okay, so these are the top 25 rankings. Everyone's talking about Penn State. I do want to let's talk about Penn State in a second. I do want to hone in on Indiana and BYU jumping Tennessee. Tennessee had a 2-score game, a 2-score victory. Indiana and BYU both jumped. BYU, for all intents and purposes, they lost their football game, and then they jumped up against a bad 4-4 team. Indiana jumps after a 20-15 win against Michigan. Ward Manuel, listen, these guys, it's better to just do it because the explanations are always awful. So he credits Indiana and Michigan, or BYU, excuse me, for winning games, big games on their schedule. Utah was 4-4 going into the game. Michigan was 5-4 going into that game. These are not big games. I understand it's a name opponent for Indiana, right? I understand it's a rivalry game. You know, it's the Holy War with BYU and Utah. I get that. Don't give me these explanations. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense to me. It would be much better if he had simply said, look, we should have done this the week before. And so we're just correcting our mistake from the week before. And then you can just say, oh, you know what? Hey, if that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. You come up with these explanations, and it's just disgusting, and it makes no sense. It truly does. Yeah, you're going to credit a 5-4 win, a 20-15 victory over a 5-4 team. Like, excuse me. Like, is anyone gonna credit Notre Dame? I mean, what is Virginia's record at this point? Are they 5-4? They're 5-4 as well. Are everyone going to be like, you know what? This is a big game on Notre Dame's schedule. Look, Virginia just beat a ranked Pitt. Like, why is that not a big win? So I just, please spare me from that stuff. I don't want to handle that. Jamie, your reaction: Indiana 5, BYU 6, Tennessee 7. Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, the reasoning is like, I agree with you. It's totally stupid. I think that, which is also too why they should just put out the rankings and then they don't talk every week. Just put out the rankings. And then, you know what? You can have the ESPN talking heads debate it. Fine. But when they give the answers, it makes them look stupid because they end up going back against what they said a few weeks earlier all the time. They do that all the time. And it's going to change, obviously, before, they get to the end point. And it just sounds dumb. So I think it's stupid. I don't think that Indiana, like, look, all these teams like Indiana, it's going to be stupid because if they lose to Ohio State this week, like, they go from 5 to out, like out, like they have to, right? Because they haven't played anybody good,
right?
They don't have any good wins. Their best win is, Nebraska at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or Michigan. So those aren't good wins. So, that's not something that, it's going to play itself out. So I don't, it's dumb that they're 5, but it's like, who cares? It's going to get decided. And you know what? If they beat Ohio State, then yeah, guess what? They deserve to probably be up and whatnot. But I think it's dumb for BYU because they really don't have anybody again until, I mean, I suppose they could lose because they've been kind of been Miami-ish where they're
favored by like 3 points this week. I mean, they're not heavy favorites against another not good team. So
yeah, no, I mean, and I think a large chunk of the Big 12 is in kind of like the murky middle of like what it is for like college football, where they're like probably like 25 to 50-ish or whatever. If you were gonna really look at like where teams are ranked, right? Like if you told me that like Baylor beat any of the teams that were there, you'd be like, okay, sure, like that could totally happen, right? So like even Penn State, I mean, the one thing you could say about Penn State is that James Franklin always beats who he's supposed to beat. So unfortunately, they're going to win their next, they're going to win out and go 11-1 and they're going to get in. But it's just going to look so bad if they're like the 4th, they're considered the 4th best team at that point, because they'll really have no great wins at that point. And some of these other teams shouldn't be like kind of banged on for like not for having more losses because they've played like way better teams. I think it'll be really interesting because it's all going to switch out, because look, like you're going to look at it where Notre Dame's going to have the comparable where they're going to play USC, and if they beat Army, they beat Virginia, they beat Army, and then they beat USC, and let's say they beat USC by 17 points. Well, that's a lot better win than like squeaking by them in overtime.
For sure.
So you kind of, and they're both on the road, right? So it's like you kind of have to look at the comparables there and do that kind of thing if you're looking at it, because it really only makes sense. Like if you have a common opponent, and obviously Tennessee, you look at their 7 right now. Well, they're playing this week. Tennessee has played like a really easy schedule. They had one of the easiest schedules in the SEC this year, and they played no one out of conference too. So they're going to, but if they win this week against Georgia, which I'm not sure if Nico's going to be available or not, the quarterback's going to be available or not this week. But let's just say he is available and they beat Georgia this week. Well, they'll move up because they're going to be a one-loss team, that they're going to be in essentially, unless they lose to Vandy in the to the end of the season, they're going to be in the SEC championship game. They're going to be ranked high and they deserve to be. But if they lose to Georgia, that's kind of like they kind of won't have enough wins to really like prove that they deserve to be there, right?
Yeah.
Like they're gonna be or they'll be like 11 or something, like they'll be just like hanging on there, right? Like, because I think if you look at it, you'd say like, well, Old Miss beat Georgia, they lost to Georgia. Like there's all these other comparables that are going to get kind of mixed in because there's a bunch of common opponents that are kind of coming up. So
Yeah,
it's going to work itself out. Except for, unfortunately, I just don't think like they're kind of putting themselves in a corner where Penn State they're either going to keep them up just because they already had them up, or it's going to be very much like the Baylor TCU thing from many, many years ago, where they were both like, hey, they were like going to be, one of them was going to be in, and then all of a sudden Ohio State jumped them at the end because it was like, well, Ohio State, and then it was like, well, those teams kind of got screwed based on, what it was, but it was just, they change the rules all the time of what they're going to actually evaluate, and it's probably going to happen again.
Yeah, I think Penn State has an excellent chance to drop. Here's what's funny. CFB Hurt says BYU sucks. Here's the thing. I think BYU is definitely worse than like Indiana is, right?
Yes.
But BYU is the one with the good wins. like they've beaten SMU. Wins, yeah. They've beaten Kansas State. Like it's funny. Like I do think BYU is worse and their metrics are worse, but they do have the actual wins. And Indiana doesn't have those wins. They don't have anything close to those wins, actually. And so it's kind of funny how I view them, I evaluate them. Like in mine on Tuesday, I think BYU is not very good, but I put them 4 because shoot, they beat the teams. Like, what can you do? You play them and you beat them. That's all you can do on your schedule situation. I think Penn State. Here's my thing on Penn State. Like, I think if they were to win out, they could be a playoff team. That's fine to me. Like true. Like I actually like they have.
No, I think they are.
I think they've played well enough to where it's like you got to be a playoff team. Like I don't think they should get to host the game though, because the way I see it is you already hosted your biggest game of the year and you lost. You got to go on the road now. Like I'm sorry, you have to go on the road against a good team that's actually ranked, and you have to show that you're capable of doing that. In my opinion, like that to me, that's fair. It's like, look at, because they have to admit, like their schedule stinky smelly. It's a stinky smelly schedule, and you had the home game against Ohio State. You lost the game. In my opinion, didn't look particularly good. Like I think Boise State has a much better, like that. The point made is true. Boise State looked a lot better against Oregon than Penn State did at home against Ohio State. I mean, Boise State, that game was back and forth, right? Like that was a close game, and Oregon did well to come back and win, right? In hindsight, I just think they got to show more. I don't think you can reward them with a home game. I just don't think so. Certainly not a bye, but I don't believe that's going to happen. What is your here? Let me get to this question here. Actually, Bradley Mustache. Is there any chance the Big 12 and ACC send more than one representative? I think the Big 12 is just a no way. That they have.
No way.
There's a no way because everyone has 2 losses, and whoever loses in the championship
game, BYU,
yeah, other than BYU, but whoever loses in the championship game will have multiple losses. I mean, 3rd loss. I mean, that's no good. And I mean, if Colorado was to beat BYU, it's like that's a 2-loss Colorado team, right? Like I just don't
think. I think they'll take 2-loss SEC, 2-loss Big Ten will get in over 1-loss BYU. That's what will happen, right? And Yeah, I mean, there isn't any scenario that I think that they could do it, because the other thing is that um, what BYU, the only thing BYU has to hang their hat on that could maybe make it where they would like maybe be like the 11th possible is that SMU could win the ACC.
Yeah.
And they beat them. So if SMU wins the ACC, which by the way, guys, the ACC stinks. I think most people know. It stinks. It's bad. It's bad, right? Especially, it's like one of those. The ACC right now is kind of what the Big 12 was for years, where it's like, oh man, when Texas and Oklahoma stink, this is a bad league. That's what it is right now, because Florida State and Clemson are not what they used to be. So that changed the dynamic of the league, because the rest of the teams aren't that good. They're just not, right? So I think so SMU very well could win the ACC. Then it's like one of those things where it's like that. I mean, that win is probably going to mean something, and maybe it is the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
getting in and being like, the 11 seed, the 12 seed would go to the Power 5, whatever team, right? But like, but still, is it going to be better than like, I don't know, some of these other teams? Like, if I guess the SEC has to work itself out. Like, there's too many other scenarios that could happen with teams losing and winning and all that could kind of change things. But like, I just don't like. I don't know. Like, it's totally undetermined what SEC teams are going to be in it. Like, Georgia. Obviously, everything changes if they beat Tennessee this week, and that's there. But if they lose, they're Dunsky. Like, that's it. Like, 3 loss. I don't think I think before, when there was all this idea of like, man, a 3-loss SEC team could make it in, and I just don't see that happening now.
Yeah, not now, not at this point. Most of it, I think, in theory, they could in another year, but when you have the number of teams that are like undefeated at this point, like Indiana's and the BYU's, 1-loss teams, like, it's just, I don't know that this is the year for it. I think in theory it could happen, but it won't this year. Georgia, so they're out, right? So they're ranked 12th here, but basically with the automatic bids, like, they would be out in this current iteration of the playoff. Interesting. It's an interesting decision by the committee, but I do think that they are also like, I think they're kind of hedging at this point with some of these picks, because they know they have Tennessee coming up, right? Yeah. So it's like, if they're at 12, if they beat Tennessee, they'll just go back in. And if they lose to Tennessee, well, then they have 3 losses and they're going to be out. Georgia's an interesting case. There's a guy on the Twitter machine who's speaking nonsense about their situation.
I saw that. You shut him up pretty good, I think. I mean,
please continue.
No, for those who didn't see it, like, Greg just basically said, like, it's just so dumb. Like, this guy's basically arguing that Notre Dame would lose to Texas A&M today, and they lost the Northern Illinois game. But first of all, why are they losing to Texas A&M today? Like, just because Reed is the quarterback? Because I don't know about you, but Reed didn't look that great the next week after LSU. And he also played other weeks where he was just okay. Like, he wasn't dynamite. Like, he wasn't like, LSU's defense couldn't do anything to stop him. Also, Notre Dame's defense better than LSU's defense. Not even close. So, whatever. Second of all, like, this is the gist of what you said. It's assuming that Notre Dame would lose to NIU today, which no, it would not happen. And also, like, it's also not taking into account that Notre Dame has gotten better over the course of the year. So other teams get better. These SEC teams get better, but not Notre Dame. get out of here, guy with your headphones and your stupid Twitter thing from Dog Central. Like, what a loser. What a dumb, loserish take. First of all, like you said, Georgia, you're gonna get in if you win what you're supposed to. But guess what? Your margin for error just went down because you lost. And as he typed that tweet, Carson Beck threw another pick in practice. Okay. Like, get out of here with these. I hate these losers like this who just do this. It's like, make these dumb arguments that it's like completely one-sided, doesn't take into account all of it. It makes no sense. Georgia, guess what? If they beat Tennessee and they went out the rest of the way, even if they can't go into the SEC championship game, 2 loss Georgia's getting in. Okay, so chill to that guy. But let's be honest here. Like, you almost lost to bad Kentucky. You've lost 2 games. You played like dog crap in a lot of other games. You're basically hanging on to one big win against Texas, who, by the way, Texas really hasn't played a tough.
There's a lot of questions about Texas right now. Just like I think they were shoehorned into like, oh, they're a great team. But what have they done, right? Like I
don't think they're as good as last year.
No, they're not, and it's they don't have the best resume either. I mean, it's kind of to their it's not really their fault per se, but like they really did not listen. They did not look good in that Georgia game at all. And I mean, they get the pick 6 or the pick, was it a pick 6 or was it just to the 1 or whatever? I think it was down to like anyway, you get the interception, the much ballyhooed interception, whether it should have counted. And it's 23-15, and then they give up right down the field again to Georgia. Like, that is just puckering, and in a huge situation, a huge game to them. And I just like you look at their Michigan win, it's like, well, they're awful, right? And like, I get it, right? Like at the time of game, people thought Michigan would win, right? I understand that, but it's much different than like these wins do have to stand the test of time to some extent. Yeah, and that one, it's clearly not. Like, it has clearly not. So look, I'm fine with wherever they're going to be. If they win the SEC or how they're projecting here, then fine. Their ranking will be A, it'll be cemented, and B, it's earned at that point. They're going to have to play Texas A&M on the road, right? Which Notre Dame did. The Fighting Marcel Reeds, right? Marcel, Tebow, Newton, Manziel, they're going to have to play him, right? So they're going to have to, prove their chops, and they have the SEC championship game if they get to that point. But like, just as it stands today, Texas, like a little side eye. We got to look at a little side eye at Texas there. Look, I talked about it on the show last week. I can't stand this Texas A&M revisionist history. And the funny thing is like Tom Fornelli made the same point on Cover 3. What are you doing? What is going on here? Oh, look it. I made the point, and I'll make it again. They played the game. Everyone said, "Oh, Kyle Field, you can't go into Kyle Field to do that." Everyone picked Texas A&M. Texas A&M was favored, and now it's like, oh, if only they would have done this. Marcel Reed was on the team. They could have played him. Play him. It's not Notre Dame's fault that they decided not to play him. And
the other guy was playing bad too. Could have yanked him.
Everyone said going into that game, Connor Wegman is going to be the difference in this game, and how good Connor Wegman was. And Notre Dame made him look like a goofball. Marcel Reed, they made Caleb Williams look like a goofball in their game last year. But Marcel Reed's going to get over on them. Go away. There's no evidence. You just can't. I can't hear that. I cannot be like that. And I'm not going to stand for that. So that's where it is. And look, the thing with Notre Dame is the same as a bunch of these teams, right? Notre Dame's ranking is fair at 8. They have to win out, right?
Yeah.
They can very easily just lose a game, right? And look at and people talk to me about Riley Leonard and how there is a general mistrust of him online, despite how he's played in the last like 7 games. And people they won't let it go. And the thing that I think about a lot is that rant by legend on the Feinbaum show about
that was
how they lost, about how Bama lost to Vanderbilt like that. And he likened it to your significant other catching them cheating on you. And I think for Riley Leonard, it's fans kind of have that where it's like, you hurt me as a fan, right? From fan parlance, you hurt me in a way that I can't just, it's too soon for me to get over it. And I kind of get it, right? Like, let's be honest. Riley Leonard is kind of solely responsible for that loss. There were a lot of contributing factors. He made a mistake that was a backbreaker, and you cannot make the mistake. Okay. And especially from a fan point of view, it's very easy to look at him and be like, look, you blew this game. I do not trust you. I don't care what it looks like. I don't trust you. And the only way for him to earn that trust back is to just keep on winning and keep on playing the way that he has and lead Notre Dame to a playoff berth, right? They beat Virginia this week. They beat Army next week. They beat USC to close out the season. They'll be 11-1. They'll be on a 10-game winning streak. They will be in the playoff. And I think people will be able to move on. But until that happens, right? Like Notre Dame is in no different position than Georgia, right? They're in no different position than Tennessee or a bunch of these other teams. Like all the teams kind of in this mix are in the same situation. If you lose again, the only team who hasn't lost is Oregon. Any of these other teams, if you lose again, you're done. Notre Dame is in the same spot. And Notre Dame doesn't have Tennessee, right? Or Georgia or Bama or any of those games coming up, right? Like Penn State or Indiana. Like they got to play Ohio State. Notre Dame doesn't have that. This is a moment they need to seize the moment. Okay. And they need to take care of business. Where they are right now is not guaranteed. You got to start winning.
No, nothing's guaranteed. Yeah.
Right. And they're all in that situation. So you got to seize the moment. Notre Dame's got to seize the moment, and you have to seize the moment for your media company. If you don't have a good media company, then seize the day, seize the moment, and head over to VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior, and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Okay. Let's get rid of this. Let's talk about Notre Dame versus Virginia. Speaking of seizing the moment, coming up, Marcus Freeman is talking about Jack Kaiser in this game. Jamie, he is going to play a program record 63rd career game for Notre Dame on Senior Day. Program record. I believe he's beating Houston Griffith, which is maybe better for maybe better for Jack Kaiser to hold that record than Houston Griffith. No shade at him,
I would say.
It's
just a reality. He's had a better career than Houston Griffith had. Yeah,
he's a captain. That's amazing. Truly, he's a local player. It wasn't the highest rated recruit, right? I remember when he was committed to Notre Dame and signed. Fans were not very happy. 63 career games. Congratulations to Jack Kaiser on that. Would you say, I think there were a lot of questions about Jack Kaiser having a full-time role this year. He was very productive in limited roles throughout his career. Would you say that this year has been pretty much what you would have expected from him? Like, has he lived up to kind of what was asked of him as a captain so far in 2024?
Yeah, I think he's had a pretty good year. He leads the team in tackles. First of all, unsurprisingly, the guy is an absolute consistent tackling machine. He's, barely missed any tackles in his career. It's kind of insane. he has, he's played 63 games. Like you said, he's missed 11 tackles in his career.
In his career?
In his career.
What a stat.
Yes. So, it's pretty remarkable. And kind of like, Al Golden talked about it in terms of his, he had to take on a lot this year in terms of not just, being the green dot, the guy who's like kind of being the quarterback of the defense and all that, and taking a bigger role doing that and kind of like getting everybody set up, but also too doing that while playing with like mixing a match of different young linebackers next to him constantly. And obviously a lot of those guys are really smart guys too, but they didn't have the experience that Kaiser had. There's a lot of times where they're looking for him to lead. He's been an incredible mentor to all of these guys that are there. Kind of like building off of just like what JD Bertrand and Maris Leofau did too. So and the thing is too is that he hasn't just been like a bit guy for his career too. He's like made plays and played a ton. He's played a ton and obviously been a starter. He started out of those games. He's started over like 20 games or something in his career. So he started about 1/3 of the games and then played a lot in the other games that he didn't start too. Think about too, like even like Ohio State, big fourth down play. He's making a play there, right? Like he's making a play on that jet sweep on 4th and short. He's doing that kind of stuff. So I think he's a guy who's probably underappreciated in a lot of ways, and deserves to be celebrated. On this last home game for him, because he's had a great career, and frankly, too, like, I mean, he'll get a shot in the NFL. I'm sure of it. He'll get a shot. I hope he gets. Would love to see him get a Senior Bowl invite. I'm not sure if he will or not. I hope he does. But like, if not, he'll be at like the Shrine Bowl or one of those other All-Star games too. But he's a guy that I could see playing in the league for at least some time, and then also he might be a guy who's like a GM or something down the line. He's one of his things that he's doing for his masters is analytics, and he's like really like into that and stuff too. So he's a really, really smart guy, a great representative of the university, obviously. And if anyone's ever talked to him or met him too, he's a great dude, a really, really great dude. So love to see him getting kind of mentioned and honored like this. And you know what? Having that kind of thing like that's a pretty, even you could say for Houston Griffith, whatever, no shade at Houston Griffith at all too. Houston Griffith playing that many games at Notre Dame, that is something to be proud of.
For sure.
Jack Kaiser doing the same thing, like something to be very, very proud of. And, congratulations to Kaiser on just, a really nice career at Notre Dame.
Yeah. You know what, too? Like, hand up. I took a stray at Houston Griffith. There's no need for that. I raised my hand on that. I should do better. I really didn't need to do that. Credit to Jack Kaiser. I don't need to take a shot at anybody else. So my apologies on that one. Let's talk about Virginia here. They're a 5-4 team. They are in the midst of they snapped a 3-game losing streak last week by beating Pittsburgh 24-19. Their previous results were against home against Louisville, a 24-20 loss, 48-31 loss at Clemson, and then a 41-14 loss at home to North Carolina, in which they gave up 10 sacks, Jamie. That's not good. 10 sacks in a game? That's insane. Notre Dame had 8 against
Florida State.
Yeah. Against Florida State. And think about how many sacks that was, right? Where it was just like, my goodness, like every play they're sacking the quarterback. 2 more sacks allowed by Virginia in that game. They do not have a good offensive line in terms of the pass protection. They have a negative point differential. They're scoring 26, allowing 26.7. Not the greatest running team, 3.9 yards per carry. They've run for 1,294 on the season, despite the fact that they do have a quarterback, Jamie. Kobe Pace is their top running back, 100 carries, 442 yards. That's 4.4 yards per carry. Anthony Calandria. Now, look, I think some of their overall rushing stats are hurt by the fact that they give up a lot of sacks. Anthony Calandria, you noted, is a running quarterback. Just off the top, running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks are always kind of scary, just because of the way that they can, they can muck up the game, just kind of on outside of what the game plan is in the play call. How much of a threat do you think he is to do that for Virginia in this game?
I mean, he's definitely a threat to do that. He can escape the pocket, but obviously he hasn't escaped that well in recent. He's been sacked 16 times in the last 2 games. 23
I think you said 25% of the pressures turn into sacks, I believe is what you said.
Which is a really bad number, right? Like it's near the bottom. And they are a team that they can't, like Malachi Fields is a dude. Someone mentioned, him earlier on just in the chat or whatever, just talking about how he's a legit player. He is a legit player. He's 6'4", 220. He's a big dude. He's a productive guy. He's going to play in the NFL. He's a really, really good athlete. That's a guy that I would say, if you're looking at kind of like where, the matchups that Notre Dame has had this year, obviously Notre Dame hasn't matched up against a ton of great receivers. It's probably been since, Elikai Manor was probably the last big time guy, but you could see how like he wasn't really a factor for Stanford in that game. It just like, it's tough to be a factor if you can't protect long enough to get the ball to him down the field. Right. And he's a guy who wins, even though he's straight line fast. He's not a guy who blows by people. He wins with his body. Like he wins by like bodying guys out, and he's got good ball skills. That's a tough way to win against Notre Dame because Notre Dame's DBs are so good at finishing. They're very physical. Obviously, they're just like sticky on these receivers, and Notre Dame's pass rush is gonna get home enough when you do that, when you go long enough, and their line has been bad, right? Like it's just been bad at protecting. Calandria is a good runner, and they like how they beat Pitt. So it's like one of those things where you're like, oh, they beat a ranked Pitt. So it's like, well, you got to be on your toes because they beat a ranked Pitt team. Well, one, Pitt shouldn't have been ranked. They shouldn't have. I understand they had the record, but they are in the Indiana, they ain't played nobody thing. And then they played people and then they lost. Right. So that's what's kind of happened to them. And Pitt is 47th in F+. Like they're just, they're above average team. They're not a great team. And the 3 best teams, the 3 top 40 teams that they played, who you mentioned, North Carolina, Louisville, and Clemson, they lost to, right? They lost to. So they are not on that level of like, that they can beat these teams. They just don't have enough talent really, right, to make up for it. It's like one of the things with Chris Tyree, like he should be having a better year than he's having, and he was banged up a little bit at the beginning of the year. He had a bad first game where he dropped 3 passes too, but he plays in the offense. Like I said, they can't throw the ball to him down the field. He's catching like screens and little hitches and whatever. And like, I think people know from at Notre Dame, he isn't that guy who's going to like take a hitch and take it to the crib. He can if he gets a space, right? But he's not someone who's like great at just like making somebody miss or whatever. But he's a guy who can run by you.
Right.
But if you can't have the time for him to run by you, that's a problem. That's a big problem. And the offense really just isn't good enough to do it. And really, like, they're brutal they're 132nd red zone touchdown percentage against FBS competition this year. Like, it's second to last. Like they're bad when it comes to it. And I always think red zone, I mean, some of it's coaching, certainly, right? But when you don't have a line to just say, hey, we're going to lean on you and run the ball here,
Yeah.
or you don't have guys who can win outside enough to do it, and they don't, because, and obviously too, like Fields is a guy like people put extra attention on, and they don't have anybody else who like consistently can win one-on-one. So that makes it, just awful hard for them to, they basically need Calandria to be Superman. And it's just, that's asking too much. And he was pretty good last year as a freshman. Like he was 34th in QBR, but he's like 90. Here, hold on, I'll grab the number here. He's 95th in QBR this year. So quite a drop. Quite a drop.
Yes. So Malachi Fields, getting back to him, he had a couple of big games early. So he had 5 for 100 against Richmond and then 11 for 148 against Wake Forest. Since then, he's only had one game where he had over 70 yards rushing. 70 yards receiving. And that was against Louisville. So that's a good opponent, right? 9 for 129. But since then, 3 for 65 against Clemson, 3 for 48 against North Carolina, 2 for 11 against Pitt. So he, hasn't been doing it recently. Look, and this is like the best passing defense in the country, right? And so look and the other part is like they're moving him around and they want to get him in the slot. Now, normally you get a guy like that in the slot and it's like, oh, okay, like this is a favorable situation for us. You're going against Jordan Clark, who might be playing as well as anyone in the Notre Dame secondary at this point, right? So that's not a favorable situation. Where look, he can do numbers, right? Like he's a talented player. He can catch some passes against Notre Dame. I'm not saying they're going to shut him out, but it's like it's hard to find a situation where you say to yourself, yeah, like this is where he's going to cook. I hope he doesn't get on this guy or that guy. Like that's not the situation. With Chris Tyree too, like he's, like you said, he's a screen guy, and it looks like his numbers look a lot like you would see from a running back. He has 22 catches for 124 yards, 5.6 yards per catch. He does not have a touchdown this year. So it's like, look, I almost guarantee they're going to give him some kind of a reverse, right?
Yeah,
they're going to get him involved
just
because of the situation, right? That Notre Dame, he's playing in Notre Dame again. They're going to give him something. And so look they are a viable football team, right? They've been in games late, right? Look, 24-20 against Louisville. That's a good result, right? What they've done recently isn't great as far as like the way that North Carolina blew the doors off them, right? Like you don't want to have something like that on your recent history. But look, there were a lot of things that went into the Pitt game, but that's still a close game no matter what, right? Even if Pitt were to come out and squeeze it out in the end, it's still a close game. That's a viable football team. Notre Dame's going to have to play well. You can't play poorly, but Notre Dame is playing well right now. And so there's just no reason to think that Virginia's offense is going to give there's nothing about them that especially gives you concerns. Like not in the way that like someone like Army does, where it's like, look, Army is whatever they are, they can run the ball inside and they want to run the ball inside. If Howard Cross is going to be healthy, Army can keep the ball away from you. And so that is something that's like monitoring, right? Like you want to kind of have your ears, perked up for that. Virginia doesn't really have that. They have good players. They're okay, but like they're really stressed Notre Dame. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and their flaws aren't just like, hey, they're like, average at this or below average. They're like bad. Yeah. They're bad at certain things. And it's like if you kind of look at what the defense is. So, so they beat Pitt. Well, they're probably losing to Pitt if they didn't knock the Pitt quarterback out. Like the backup came in and then that guy threw 2 picks and sucked for Pitt. So, I mean, if that guy was in the game, they probably lose it. Like UVA beat them basically by holding the ball longer than them and playing that kind of strategy, like where they dominated time of possession and knocked the quarterback out. And that's what, they did. And they're like on defense, they are one of the worst in the country at giving up explosive plays. So it's kind of like what you've seen from Stanford, from Florida State, where you're like, oh, like they give up a lot and they get beat in matchups. They give up like too many plays of 20 plus yards. They're 132nd in games in explosive plays against in the passing game against FBS competition this year, right? So and a lot of that too is, I mean, their starting corners are a transfer from Eastern Michigan, a transfer from Penn. Like they don't have guys that and a transfer from Robert Morris. That's not ideal. Like sometimes you can hit on some of these guys, right? But there's a reason why a lot of those guys end up there. And the fact that they haven't like had anyone and developed somebody there. And also too, if you look at like, if anyone checks out the scouting reports I do on Irish Sports Daily, a lot of the times too, you can see like, I'll put in guys like track numbers or their testing numbers from high school to kind of like give an idea of like what kind of athlete these guys are and what they tested at, and like kind of say, because even sometimes at these small schools you're like, oh, this guy can run, like he's fast, like he can run with anybody, right? They don't have guys who were like, this guy's elite 100-meter. Like I'm talking about, they'd have nobody.
Yeah.
Like obviously Chris Tyree is fast, but Malachi Fields is fast, but they don't have a bunch of other guys with elite testing numbers. It's just not there, or like elite track times. Mm-hmm. That hasn't been a thing that they've done. Which, maybe get on that, Tony Elliott, to kind of improve the athleticism of your team, because I think that's really there. And I would say too, like they're not athletic enough at defensive back. Their D line is okay. Like they're okay. Like they got some big dudes, some young defensive tackles that are getting better, and they got a couple DNs that are probably like undrafted free agent types that are like, maybe could make the league, like, older guys. But their back seven specifically, like their linebackers, they're just not good athletes. They're downhill guys, and they also have to overplay the run to stop it. So that's why they don't give up a lot. And Jonas Anker is a stud safety for them. He's a very good player. But one guy isn't good enough to, for what you have. Like you can see, even when one guy is asked to do too much, that's what happened to like the guy at Purdue, like Dylan.
Yeah,
Pianema,
I was literally just about to say that. That's funny. Yeah. Like you just can't. You're going to put him in a bad spot. And like, look, a safety is kind of the chess piece that basically takes the whole thing to another level, right? They're usually not going to be the thing that makes your defense really good, or that's going to take a bad defense to like a good defense. That's not really how it works. So yeah, like it's just, I would say like there's a lot that, in the chat, everyone's talking about how it's kind of like the Florida State game. Like I don't think they're going to win. I don't think Notre Dame's going to win 52-3 or anything. But like something like I was thinking, because we got to give our predictions today. I was thinking something like 38-14, like 41-14, something like that. Like you can't. I think at this point, you can't count on Riley Leonard having like a bad game, because here's the thing: like he didn't have a very good game last week in terms of just his general accuracy and generally his decision making and things like that. Like I don't think he's going to have two bad games in a row. And I think that's kind of like they came off the bye. And look, at as much as Marcus Freeman can talk about, like 52-3 isn't really indicative of how well they played on offense. Like they played well in spurts, obviously, but just like we talked about after the game, like there was enough in that game to where film was probably pretty rough for some of those guys, Yeah. And I think like from the overall level of play, I think there's a lot more there. And I think that Notre Dame, they're going to see that in this game. I think Notre Dame's going to be a much sharper team than they were against Florida State. And Virginia just beat Pitt. So like that raises their ears up a little bit too. Do you kind of have something else in mind? Do you feel like there's a little bit more of a threat from Virginia in this game? I mean, I think Notre Dame would have to just they'd have to revert back to what they were during the kind of the NIU, Miami, Ohio times in order this to be close.
I mean, even with that, is Riley Leonard not running?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because I mean, he's ran on everyone, other than when he didn't run because he was hurt. So if he's running and he's still a threat in this game, does Jeremiah Love still play for Notre Dame? Yeah, he does. Like, they still have these guys. They have more guys who can just all of a sudden, like, things can be like, man, they're not really doing much. Then I get Price can take it 60 to the crib, and then it's just like that, right? Yeah. And like, Leonard didn't play as well, and someone said, oh, Leonard only had this numbers against Florida State, but what really mattered in the game was, one, he rushed for 80 something yards again, and they hit a ton of deep balls in the game, which they haven't done before that. But it's like not to that many things, but it's like he can have the exact same kind of game in this game, and they will blow Virginia out, right? So I think Virginia would need a whole lot of help. Like, they got to get like a bunch of lucky breaks for it to happen. And the thing is that I don't think their line isn't good enough for them to have anything sustained against her. Could Calandra run around and make like an incredible play? Could Malachi Fields make like a catch like a 50-yard touchdown? Yeah, that all could happen. I mean, they run a ton of trick plays. They've thrown double pass a bunch, right? They could hit something there. They could do some of that stuff to kind of stay in the game and get a bunch of breaks. But there's too many. Notre Dame is just too, like, a different level than them. And even if you look at, say, like, what happened to them against Clemson and against North Carolina, was just like they were overwhelmed. They just didn't have the guys against them. And it was just like blatantly obvious. And that's what's probably going to happen in this game. So I don't think it'll be a 52-3, but like, Notre Dame could play better on offense and they could win like 38-7 or 38-13 or something, right? Like something like that.
Yeah. People have mentioned the drops in the game. I mean, that also goes to my point, right? Like, those players were in for probably a bad film session on Sunday, right? Like that's all that those are all the things that made the game probably a little bit closer in the first half than it should have been, right? And I don't know that you can count on that if you're Virginia again. I mean, you'd have to. The other problem is like Notre Dame is explosive in the running game, and they're one of the best red zone touchdown teams in the country too. So like, even when they're not getting explosives, like, they're scoring in the red zone. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what you want, right? Like, if you're not going to be super explosive team, then you better be ultra efficient in the red zone. And Notre Dame has been. So look, Virginia would have to have Notre Dame to just stop being the efficient red zone team they have been, and probably create some turnovers as well. And that's pretty much, now we're talking about any given game. This is what the opponent needs to happen, right? It's unfortunate for them that like none of the things that they do or that they're good at are the things that really stress Notre Dame. And that just makes for a difficult matchup. And Notre Dame is an elite unit on defense in terms of the passing game. And they're one of the better running teams in college football. I know we don't think of them that way because of the offensive line and the perception of the offensive line and the weaknesses there. But it's just, the fact of the matter is, they are a very good running team, and they have become more of an explosive passing team. Even though it's not as explosive as we would want, it's certainly explosive enough against a team like Virginia. Interesting question from John Tucker here. We can touch on before we get out of here. Notre Dame sure could have used Chris Tyree this year, And hindsight being 2020, he would have seen significant playing time, especially with the injury to Faison and the lack of production from Jaden Harrison. So if you go back and watch film of Chris Tyree, like he caught a lot of passes in terms of like the post route against USC for a long touchdown. Some slot fades. He caught some corner routes against like Clemson. That one comes to mind. There was another one. I want to say it was Wake Forest, maybe one of those games, Wake Forest or Pitt, or one of those. Maybe it was both of those teams. He caught a long touchdown pass against Pitt as well. He had a punt return touchdown. The thing is I don't know if that sort of thing continues on this particular team. Because if you think of Jaden Harrison and the things that he's done, he's caught those slot fades and he's caught those corner routes. So like, I don't know that the lack of production from the slot is a Jaden Harrison problem as much as it's been just the way that the offense has kind of manifested itself. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
No, I 100% agree with that. I think if Tyree was right to probably leave, because the other thing is like, we're not even talking about Jaden Greathouse. And it's like, it was a crowded room. Even before Jaden Harrison came in, it was like, and then also they were going to play maybe Faison there. It's like,
yeah.
And Tyree is not an outside receiver, so he wasn't going to play there. I mean, could he have helped the team? Sure, he could have. He definitely could have. But I don't know if his role was going to be bigger than it was last year. And I think he wanted that. Unfortunately, he went to like a bad situation, and he's been beat up and stuff too. It looked like it was going to be a better situation. They threw the ball down the field a lot more last year. His ADOT last year was like over 11 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like hold on, let me find it. So average depth of target last year, 11.4 for Notre Dame. This year, 2.5. So a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
A little bit of a difference. So I think you could say, yeah, he could have helped and done this, but I don't think they would have. They just weren't throwing the ball deep.
Yeah.
They weren't throwing the ball deep. So it's like, and they wouldn't just throw the ball deep to him, because they're going to throw it to Collins and they're going to throw it to Harrison and Greathouse and Faison. Like, they're going to do some of that for everybody. So I mean, I don't know. I just think like the difference between him and Harrison, Tyree had a bigger year last year, but the difference between them, negligible to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't make or break anything.
Yeah. I don't, John Tucker says you can't criticize Tyree for his decision. No.
Oh, no,
I think he was right. I think he was right to leave. I think he just chose the wrong situation.
Yeah.
There was definitely a role for him. Look, I will continue to beat this drum, and I don't care if people disagree or whatever it might be. The receiver that Notre Dame of the transfers, the receiver that it would be most beneficial for Notre Dame to have is Tobias, because he has a skill set that no one else has. He just does. We could pull up all his best plays at Notre Dame, and we have not seen any of it at Notre Dame this year. So, which isn't to say it would have happened. And, he had 6 for 52 in his first game after breaking his foot for Cal last week and a touchdown. So, I mean, when has a Notre Dame receiver had 6 catches this year? And I'm not to say like he's going to catch 6 passes at Notre Dame or whatever. I'm just saying that skill set, you wish it was on the team. People say he can't catch. Well, okay. Well, the highlights show that he actually can. But whatever. He's off to Cal, and that's fine. There was one more thing I wanted to touch on. Oh, Bradley Mistash says, is it realistic to think Notre Dame could get more sacks than last week? Notre Dame had 8 last week. So 10 against North Carolina. I think it was 7 they gave up against Pitt.
Yeah.
It's hard to say realistic more than 8.
Or 6
right?
versus Pitt. 6 versus
Or
Pitt.
was it 6 versus Pitt? Excuse me.
Yeah.
Like more than 8. It's like that's one of those things that's hard to predict. But if Notre Dame's up, it could happen. If they're like if they're up 21-0 or something, then
it's possible, but probably not going to happen. Because the other thing is too is that at some point when you're playing North Carolina like that too, like stop throwing the ball,
yeah.
or throw a bunch of fades or just
yeah.
do stuff that whatever. Like that's a fail on the coaching because it's like you can't block them, so stop doing this. Like, so I would think that they learned that. Also want to point out too that North Carolina. So by the way, Notre Dame, I mentioned in 6 Thoughts today, Notre Dame 10th in the country in sack rate. I don't know if people know that. 10th in sack, tied for 10th in sack rate. North Carolina 3rd in sack rate. So they can get after the quarterback. So they have some dudes. North Carolina, everyone remembers they gave up 70 to James Madison, and it was ugly. They've kind of played better, like kind of good in recent weeks where they're like, I would be if North Carolina's on the schedule, they would be a way friskier team to play against than Virginia. Like they have some stuff that can scare you.
Yeah.
You know, as much as people want to be like put Mac Brown out to pasture, like they do have plenty of dudes and they are playing better. And Jeff Collins, for as bad as he was the head coach at Georgia Tech, their defense has kind of turned it around and they're playing a lot better.
Mac Brown circling the wagons. I'm going to say 41-14. Where are you at, Jamie?
I was going to say 42 13. So we're right there.
We're very close. Very, very close.
There.
All right. We'll see how it plays out. We can end it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If you like what you heard, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we are going to go live. We will, of course, be live right after the game on the Instant Reaction Show. So you're going to want to tune in here. You want to subscribe to our channel. You want to take in all of our content. We'll be back tomorrow or Saturday after the game. And then I'll be on the morning after recap on Sunday. So have a good rest of your day, everyone. We'll talk to you on Saturday. Keep hitting and hustling.